Joy Passey is the founder and primary coach of Joy Prosperity Coaching and a board of director with the New York City chapter of the International Coach Federation. She's the director of communications and marketing who manages a team that oversees several branches: social media, publications, community outreach, and sponsorship. She's also the NYU Alumni Life and Business Coach for the Borough of Brooklyn, New York. She helps creative entrepreneurs construct a sustainable system of living while increasing their profits. She finds that entrepreneurs, when they are either in the startup phase of their business or growing their business, tend to become very scattered, overwhelmed, and worn out. She works with them on getting very clear about what they want to accomplish in their business, but also in their personal life. She works with the whole person. Well, welcome, Joy. It sounds like a perfect start off to the new year.
Yes, yes. Thank you for having me.
Well, I think that first question I'm going to ask you has nothing to do with everything except
Mhm.
how do you become a business coach for the borough of Brooklyn? That has me fascinated.
Yes, I've been doing boroughs in whole states. Um, they just contacted me and they interviewed me, and they liked that I have a vast array of interests and have a lot of experience in with a bunch of. I run in a lot of different circles, so that was one of the things that they liked. And I'm certified, and so they just asked if I would want to be involved. So, and I'm an NYU alumni also.
But what made the borough of Brooklyn think they needed a coach? That's what I think is fascinating. I think,
Oh, yeah, well, it's the NYU Alumni Association. So they offer different services for their alumni, and coaching now is a whole big, huge industry now. It used to be what like therapy was years and years ago, where it was kind of hush hush, and it was people were confused about what coaching is in comparison to like what therapy or mentoring is. So now, like coaching's very popular, and people realize the benefits of coaching. So
well,
that's why.
you just said you've got a myriad of interests, and I've got your resume in front of me, and it talks about a BA in creative writing where you graduated summa cum laude from Hunter College and were on the dean's list. You have a master's in educational theater. You have four certificates from FIT, the Fashion Institute of Technology, as a color specialist, wardrobe design. I mean, my gosh, so. How does your background tie into everything that you're doing?
Well, the funny thing is, growing up, I was still like in the generation where people kind of like were in the one, you grow up, you go to college, you get your one job, and you kind of stay there for a long time. So, so I was always seen as an anomaly. I was always very different because my whole background is the arts. So I grew up performing, and I've always done performing arts and writing and just anything with artistic bent. And I've always been interested in the business aspect of it. So I've always had this like split personality of like half business, half artist. And so when I moved to New York, I didn't know anybody, and I started a theater company. So with that, that was my biggest entrepreneur event at that time. And I was 21. And so coming to New York, and I didn't know anyone. So you have to, when you're an entrepreneur, you have to be creative because you have to come up with new strategies. You're obviously coming up with a new idea, a new product, but you also have to have the business sense. And so when I was growing up, people would always think who were like more corporate environment would always see me as very scattered. But to me, it's just I had a vast array of interests. And now that I've come full circle with the coaching, it's actually been extraordinarily helpful to me because I have done so many different jobs, and I have the two aspects that now I'm really able to combine it. And that's why people really like that I have that creative nature, but I also understand that you need to make money if you want to have a business. So it's been really helpful.
Well, it's interesting because you've struck a nerve. I owned my own business. I mean, I had always been an entrepreneur and worked since I was 13, creating my own jobs. But I actually owned a business also at the age of 21. And people have always said to me, "Oh, and they haven't exactly used the word scattered, but I'm sure that's what they were implying because they would say, "Well, you should just be doing one thing." And I said, "But I have a lot of different interests, and they all coordinate, and they
Mm-hmm.
all tie in together." And they all do, all those things. So you're a perfect example of that. And it's delightful because that's the way I've always been. And then I use the idea of, well, you see these people who are singers and then they turn out to be dancers, then they turn out to be actors, then they write their own scripts. And really, that's basically what you're saying.
Mhm.
You can put it all together. So tell us what you are most passionate about.
One of the reasons I really enjoy coaching, and this is, the thing is, I've also realized when I got into coaching, I've always been very helpful to people, and I've always been the go-to person who that people would reflect ideas off of, and I've always been the creative person, and so it's always been in me. Um, so I feel that I was thinking like I just forgot what your question was.
What you are most passionate
Oh,
about.
what I'm most passionate about. So my thing is like what I get really
See, you're
excited about.
scattered already,
I
Joy.
know.
How can I?
Well, I was going into like why the reason was. So what I'm most passionate about is just helping people, and I get really excited when they reach and attain a goal. So when I work with, and I also work a lot with as I said, with the creative entrepreneurs. So a lot of them are very good in knowing their product, but there's so many fears about selling themselves and that. So I just love seeing when they reach something that they never thought that they could. And I get so excited for people. Oh, and this is what I was going back to. Like, it's always been there. Like, I've always been really excited to see people succeed and to see people like all the possibilities that were right in front of them. Because I'm a really big possibility thinker. So I just like, you could do this and you can do that. And when I see that, like, they get excited for themselves and then they see that, wow, I can do this. And that's like really what makes my heart sing. It's like when I see that joy on their face and that they broke through and like were able to reach a new limit for themselves or new height for themselves, I should say. So I think
So
that's the biggest.
really, you're their biggest cheerleader. You really are the one that's saying, "Let's go for it," And I
Yeah.
think people need people like you in their lives, Joy, because there are a lot of self doubts that creep in, and
Mhm.
there are a lot of people who say, "Well, because they have so many people around them telling them you can't do this. What are you thinking about? You're not a big wig, so forth and so on." So they need somebody like you who says, "Yeah, you can do it." So who would you say is your target audience?
Well, it's really the creative entrepreneurs. So it's the people who are the cooks, the bakers, the fashion. I mean, technology is creative too. So if they want to talk about like more of like the creative aspect of it and strategies, I don't do like people in a corporate environment. So it's people who have like media, that kind of thing.
Well, that's interesting because, uh, I would think that there are some entrepreneurs who are technically oriented.
Hmm.
So, how do you work with them? What's your process and procedure?
Well, what's one thing that's really actually helpful when you're working with people who are might have a different vocabulary is to understand what their vocabulary is and then reflect it back to them because that's how they understand how to the verbiage, the language that they use, and so it's the reflection. So if I do work with IT people, I will. This is interesting. So this is kind of a thing that I did. So I did this workshop at Yale University, and I split people up into the so-called creative people, and then there was the other people who were more the tech people. And I gave them this exercise of to come up with a it was supposed to be a fictional person come up with a character like you pretend you're a playwright, you're coming up with a character, and we were going to talk about what their daily life was like. Well, the creative people came up with a fictional character, and the tech people came up with an actual person. Even though I said to do a fictional person and be a playwright, they just thought very differently, and so they needed that real substantial person that they could identify with. So it's understanding those kind of differences and then going with it as opposed to trying to force my own self on them. So if I notice things like that, okay, they need an actual person to identify with, and then look what they're doing, and then how can they take what that actual person is doing and then iterate it into their own life.
It's interesting because it's so funny because I look at tech people and I think some of them, not certainly all of them, but some of them are very creative
Mm-hmm.
because they would have to be creative to develop the companies that they develop because they are just they come up with ideas that other people don't have, and
Mhm.
that are completely out of my realm anyway. But
Mhm.
I do think that again, they just have a different way of looking at things, and it's interesting to me, isn't it, that for example, on Shark Tank, if you look at the major players there, three of them are definitely techies,
Mhm.
definitely tech people, but they can see beyond that. Then you
Mhm.
have the fashion person, you have the real estate person, you have the home shopping person, but the three guys on there, except for Damon, they're all tech people,
Yeah.
and yet they're very, very creative in what they do. So why do you think habits are the keystone to success, and what would those habits be?
Mm. Well, and this is interesting, kind of going back to the what I did at Yale was that it was understanding, they basically had a lot of the same things because it has to be with there's a repetition. So you have to be consistent with what you're going to do and reaching your goals. So that's where habits are key to success, is that it's not, things aren't just haphazard. It becomes where you do get up at a certain time and you have this routine, and routine creates the habit. And so if you have a routine that's going to make you more productive and going to make you more organized, that's obviously going to help you reach a new height for your success. If you're just all over the place and scattered and just like just can't function, you have no system, you're not going to be able to move forward in life. And that's a lot of like what I find with the creative entrepreneurs a lot of times is they tend to be very they have no system, there's just no organization, and they're just kind of running after everything, and there's no like focus. So
So
it
they
really,
really like the bright, shiny objects.
yes, yes, so much so. Yeah. And it's hard, like whether you're a startup or trying to grow your business. It's all of like trying to reach that next level, and you just want to like chase after everything, and you really have to figure out what it is that you want and then work backwards. The reverse engineering I find is very helpful. And actually both creatives and tech people understand the reverse engineering.
It's interesting because you're saying things that I say to people who are talking to me about retirement. And I always talk to them and I say, "Do you have a plan for retirement?" And they say, "Well, what do you mean?" And I say, "You can only play golf so many days. You can only go to the country club so many days. You can only do such and such so many days. And you really have to have a routine, even when you're retired, or you don't get anything done," which is why people always say, "Well, how did I get all this done when I was working so much?" But it was because they had a routine, it was because
Mhm.
they had a plan. So
Mhm.
you're absolutely right. I think it's very important to have a routine, a system, a methodology. And some people equate that with being rigid. And you're just the opposite. You're saying, no, I work with creative people and I'm a creative entrepreneur myself. And you don't have to be rigid to have a routine. So
Mhm.
explain the difference. I think for our listeners, they would be interested to know, well, I don't want to be rigid. I want to be flexible. And yet I do want a routine. So how do
Mhm.
we do that?
Well, it's interesting because I have clients who some need the planning. They need the step-by-step plan. And then other people, you can just have blocks of time or you just have a day. So depending on this, one of those things that goes back to being self-aware, and you really have to identify and understand who you are, what's the best time of day to get things done. Like whether it's writing something, like for me, I'm better at writing things first thing in the morning, whether it's like the technical stuff of like doing money or something like that. Like, what are the best times of day for you to get those certain things done? Because there are certain things in each business that everybody needs to do, right? So, so the main thing is, I always like forget where I'm going. That's the problem. I have to write everything down.
We're
Oh,
talking about, yeah, routine and versus flexibility.
so this is where my thing is I have to write everything down. So routine versus flexibility. So the routine you can either have where you either plan everything out, and or you have where you have like, maybe for me I have like Tuesdays and Wednesdays I have where it's just like building content usually, and then I'll have like the days where I just do coaching. So it's having that flexibility where I have an idea, or I'll have like the top 3 or 4 or 5 things that need to get done that day, but then the rest of the time you can have blocks of time, as opposed to like this hour I have to do this and this hour I have to do, and have it be exactly planned out. So that's where people have to decide the type of person, who they are, and what's going to work for them.